The Green New Deal is a complex plan proposed by Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This resolution gets its name from the original deal launched by our 32nd president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, to help the U.S. recover from the effects of the Great Depression. Overall, the plan addresses a vast amount of issues regarding climate change, a smart power grid, which has the capability of running the whole nation, racial inequality, healthcare, jobs, infrastructure for both homes and industrial buildings, and community development in low-income neighborhoods. The Green New Deal will first start out with a launch of a 10-year mobilization, which will ultimately be a push to reduce all carbon emissions in the United States. With that, these changes will result in 100% renewables and have zero emissions. Through the years, climate change especially has become a hot-button issue. Conversations regarding policy change in a hope to help the climate change problems have substantially increased. In 2007, New York Times editor Thomas Friedman popularized the phrase Green New Deal with the intention of bringing awareness to the idea of ending fossil fuel subsidies, tax carbon dioxide emissions, and create lasting incentives for wind and solar energy. Following President Obama's addition of the Green New Deal in the 2008 presidential election, Friedman's ideas cycled through mainstream media. Yet, with the help of a new wave of progressive candidates, such as presidential candidate Bernie Sanders in 2016, the Green New Deal was revived. Then, in January of 2019, Ocasio-Cortez announced a plan that would bring heavy debate. All in all, this plan will completely transform all walks of life, from businesses to homes, from airplanes to cars, and from neighborhoods to cities. From a public choice perspective, we will be examining the Green New Deal. First, Nick will mention how there are costs within the regulatory process. Then, I will talk about special interest groups, both in favor and not in favor of the plan. And lastly, Jeff will detail the levels of rent seeking taking place.
Overall, the Green New Deal is an expensive project, but narrowing our approach, let's look at the regulations and the impact that those regulations have on the Green New Deal. Dan Bosch of the American Action Forum, in his article called The Regulatory Impact of the Green New Deal, explains the costs and practical implications of the regulatory needs for the plan. Bosch examines the regulatory process for the Green New Deal by classifying the regulatory needs into 4 categories. Our first category deals with rules that were previously finalized that would now need to be fully implemented. In this section, where costs are easily identifiable, it focuses on the specific rules that are in the Green New Deal report that were finalized by the Obama administration and would now need to be fully implemented. These rules estimate a total cost of $16.5 billion. Our second category is strengthening current efficiency, emissions, and other environmental standards. In this section, estimating costs can become more difficult. Bosch talks about in his article how the Green New Deal calls for strengthening current standards set by the federal government. He tells us one such mandate is the energy efficiency standards on dozens of appliances, lighting, and equipment under the purview of the Department of Energy. The third type of regulation needed to fully implement the Green New Deal involves new regulatory schemes that may be allowed under existing authority. An example of this type of regulatory scheme is requiring methane leak detection and mitigation systems, which would likely build off existing methane requirements established by the EPA and the Department of the Interior. Our fourth category deals with new regulatory schemes that would require congressional authorization. These types of actions include establishing energy-efficient resource standards for all oil and gas operations, bans on single-use plastics and non-recyclable goods and packaging, and requirements for sustainable farming and soil health practices. Finalizing a cost estimate of the regulatory needs is difficult. $16.5 billion for the Category 1 regulations are the only estimated costs developed. Bosch tells us Type 2 regulations would require drastically increasing the stringency of previously promulgated rules that cost about an estimated $400 billion in their most recent form. The cost for Type 3 and 4 cannot be estimated with the available information. However, Bosch says they are likely to be substantially greater than those in Type 2.
Environmental groups all across the country are pushing for the Green New Deal. Hundreds of green environmental organizations signed a letter in early January pressuring Congress in support of the Green New Deal to make changes for the environment, which was noted in Timothy Kama's article in 2019. These groups, led by organizations like Friends of the Earth and Climate Justice Alliance, told members of the House in the open letter that lawmakers should pursue the Green New Deal, also noted in Timothy Kama's article. This push for all renewable electricity and the stoppage of burning fossil fuels is the goal for these companies. The airline industry as a whole is a group opposing the Green New Deal. Ocasio-Cortez wants to create a high-speed train which produces far less air pollution than airplanes. The trillion-dollar airline industry would be crushed by this. Most, if not all, of the $1.5 trillion US dollars annually in U.S. economic activity, directly or indirectly attributable to the airline industry, would disappear. Also noted in Dan Reed's article written in 2019. Though air travel is a small percentage of air pollution emissions, Ocasio-Cortez wants the transition. Limitations for high-speed rail include transportation time being slower than airplanes and the ability of long-distance travel, for example, going from the U.S. to Europe. So, planes will still be needed in order to travel overseas. Furthermore, the airline industry is responsible for 10 million jobs, some of which are very high paying, also noted in economist Dan Reed's article. Lobbyists for this industry are pushing hard for this deal not to pass because it would result in millions of jobs lost and slow the elimination of the industry as a whole. On the other side of the argument, the Green New Deal has the potential to create large amounts of jobs with the construction of these rails. These rail cars, compared to current trucks, planes, and automobiles, are more emissionally safe. We already have the technology for this zero-type emission expansion. Though industries like the airline sector will take a job hit, the Green New Deal has the goal to create 10 million new jobs over the first 10 years through employment and training programs, noted in Greg Carlock's Green New Deal article in 2019.
With the Green New Deal in place, the government would have more power over corporations in rent-seeking situations. Although the Green New Deal does not directly cause rent-seeking, it makes rent-seeking more of a possibility and likely to occur, in that the government will force businesses to comply with orders to fulfill a federal policy, regardless if it makes economic sense. Rent-seeking in application is when a company lobbies the government for grants, loans, subsidies, or tariff protection, and this is the only possible because the government's ability to coarsely tax and redistribute resources. Imposing a swift transition to green energy in such a short time, with the help of economic transformation on this scale, creates opportunities for rent-seeking. Entrepreneurs can actually gain more by trying to appropriate their wealth by producing goods themselves, rather than having their property rights and ownership of goods weakened by the federal government. This behavior is a form of rent-seeking, which usually requires spending your own resources so that in the end, you own someone else's surplus. For example, government lobbyists are hired to sway public policy to benefit their companies and punish their competitors. Although hiring lobbyists clearly benefits the company they represent, the work of lobbyists does not add any larger value to the marketplace. One major complaint about the Green New Deal is that it would unintentionally inhibit clean energy and energy efficiency innovation because the federal grants will be earmarked for innovation that can already be determined using tools and technologies already at hand. Blunt spending programs will force contractors to sell what they know to meet government deadlines rather than encourage research and development into the next generation of low-carbon technologies.
In this project, we have touched on 3 public choice topics that relate to the Green New Deal. First, the regulatory process and how implementing certain regulations will affect the overall cost of the plan. Then, we covered responses that have come from both special interest groups and specific industries in regards to what the Green New Deal means for them. Finally, we've discussed how the Green New Deal brings about rent-seeking. The Green New Deal is a lofty project with lots of different factors playing substantial roles. There are both positives and negatives to be taken from the Green New Deal, and it'll be interesting to see what the next steps are for Ocasio-Cortez and the Democratic Party.